14 days in a medically induced coma. 14 days breathing through a ribbed plastic tube because I grabbed the steering wheel to save my drunk brother from wrapping his sports car around a concrete pillar. My ribs were shattered. My throat was completely raw, scraped violently by the intubation. The heavy, leaden feeling of muscle atrophy weighed down my limbs, making even the act of blinking feel like moving boulders. And the very first thing waiting for me when I finally opened my eyes wasn't a prayer or a relieved face. It was a voicemail. My mother's voice buzzed through the cheap hospital phone, sharp, impatient, and ice cold. She did not ask if I was in pain. She did not thank whatever higher power existed that her daughter survived. Instead, she delivered a mandate. You almost ruined his life with that crash. We handled the Flagstaff cabin to make things right with his future in-laws. Do not be selfish about this. I swallowed the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I stared straight up at the flickering fluorescent ceiling tiles, letting the ice water flood my veins. The trauma nurse inside me, the professional who spent years stabilizing absolute chaos in the emergency room, took over. Panic is a luxury for the unprepared. I was not unprepared. As an emergency room trauma nurse, I stabilize human train wrecks for a living. I tape broken pieces together and drag people back from the ledge. Now, I was the broken piece. 2 days after I woke up, Christina, my mother, finally graced the intensive care unit with her presence. She walked in wearing expensive perfume and a tailored silk blouse, looking completely out of place against the sterile backdrop of heart monitors and IV bags. She stood at the foot of my bed, refusing to look at the massive bruising across my chest. She immediately began spinning the narrative, subtly shifting the blame for the near-fatal crash onto me to protect Gavin, her golden child. Gavin had been driving 3 times over the legal limit. But in Christina's twisted reality, I should have anticipated his state and driven him instead. She then dropped the financial anvil. They forged a quitclaim deed to sell my debt-free, inherited Flagstaff cabin to Marcus Foster, Gavin's billionaire father-in-law-to-be. They sold the only sanctuary I had ever owned for $650,000 in cash. The money was wired directly into a legacy joint checking account Christina had controlled since I was a teenager. They literally robbed me while I was on life support. The funds were already bleeding out to cover Gavin's massive hidden gambling debts and to secure his lavish destination wedding in Scottsdale. Christina stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. She demanded I stay away from the upcoming engagement gala. She claimed my medical brace and my bruised face would ruin the aesthetic of the evening, and I'm embarrassed Gavin in front of the Foster family. She viewed my survival as a social inconvenience. The audacity of exploiting my coma to fund my abuser's wedding shattered whatever residual loyalty I had left. I gave her nothing but a blank, unblinking stare until she shifted uncomfortably and left the room. I do not wait 30 days for bureaucratic medical records to process through proper channels. The system is designed to delay, and delay favors the guilty. I reached for my phone and called Whitney, a trusted colleague from the intensive care unit 3 floors down. I needed her to bypass the red tape. Within 2 hours, Whitney met me in the dimly lit concrete stairwell near the service elevators. She handed me a thick, sealed manila envelope containing my real-time electronic medical record flow sheets. This Ben's protocol. So I was never here. She whispered, her eyes darting nervously toward the security camera. Burn them to the ground. I nodded once. I never brought her name into the conflict again. I carried the envelope back to my bed and spread the pages out over my blanket. I cross-referenced my hospital vitals with a digital copy of the forged quitclaim deed I pulled from the county clerk's public database. the dirty notary. A known fraternity brother of Gavin's named Todd had stamped the deed with absolute confidence. The official state seal claimed I signed the document in person at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon on the 14th of the month. I traced my finger across my intensive care chart at exactly 2:15 in the afternoon on the 14th. My heart rate was artificially suppressed. I was fully sedated, intubated, and being kept alive by a mechanical ventilator. The trap was mathematically perfect. A forged signature can be debated by handwriting experts, but an anesthesia record is an ironclad, legally binding alibi. Gavin texted me later that evening. It was a fake, condescending apology, heavily implying I should stay home and focus on healing. He was terrified I would show up and crack his fragile facade. I typed my response with a steady hand. I wouldn't miss your big night for the world. See you tonight. Access is earned, not magic. You cannot simply walk into a billionaire's heavily fortified estate. I arrived at the ultra-exclusive Scottsdale property wearing a dark, high-neck designer dress that completely concealed my rigid medical spine brace. I did not sneak over a wall. I rolled down my window and handed the private security guard my original, thick cardstock physical invitation, mailed to me weeks before the crash. He checked the list, nodded, and the massive iron gates swung open. Inside, the estate was dripping in obscene wealth. Waiters carried trays of champagne, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. I bypassed the cocktail hour entirely and headed straight through a side corridor toward the audiovisual control booth. I did not rely on charm alone. I leveraged my mother's notoriously toxic, controlling reputation. I stepped into the booth and handed the young stress technician a small black USB drive wrapped in a crisp $100 bill. Christina Bennett demanded this surprise tribute be played during the toast. I said, mimicking her exact tone of sharp condescension, "If it is not on that screen the second he raises his glass, she will have both our jobs." The technician, clearly accustomed to the eccentric, abusive demands of wealthy clients, snatched the cash and cued the file without a second thought. I turned on my heel and walked straight into the main ballroom. The room smelled of roasted duck and old money. Christina paled the moment she spotted me. The blood drained from Gavin's face so fast he looked physically ill. I did not yell. I did not cause a scene. I walked with elegant, measured steps directly up to Marcus Foster, the billionaire patriarch, and introduced myself softly, taking a position right by his side. My family was paralyzed. They could not drag me out or silence me without looking like unhinged lunatics in front of the very man whose money and status they worshipped. The glasses clinked. The room hushed. Gavin stood up at the head table, sweating profusely through his custom-tailored silk suit. He raised his champagne flute, his hand shaking slightly, to deliver a toast to his beautiful, supportive family. The technician in the back booth hit play. But instead of childhood baby photos or romantic vacation montages, the massive 20-foot media wall behind the head table illuminated with stark, black and white legal documents. The forged quitclaim deed appeared side by side with my intensive care unit intubation chart. The timestamps at 2:15 in the afternoon were circled in thick, glowing red ink. The string quartet stopped abruptly. The silence in the ballroom became heavy and suffocating. I turned my body slightly to face Marcus Foster. My voice carried clearly across the dead silent room. "Mr. Foster, a notary swore under penalty of perjury that I sold you my cabin at 2:15 in the afternoon. As you can clearly see on the right, a machine was breathing for me at that exact minute. The room watched in absolute horror. I did not look at the crowd. I looked at Marcus. He did not gasp. He did not shout. He possessed the cold, calculating intelligence of a man who built an empire from the ground up. He realized instantly that Gavin had sold him a stolen property with a void deed, meaning his $650,000 had evaporated into thin air. Marcus simply snapped his fingers. Two massive, suited private security guards stepped out of the shadows and blocked the heavy mahogany exit doors. My lawyers will file the civil asset forfeiture on Monday morning. Marcus told Christina, his voice dropping the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. But tonight, my security is going to hold you right here in this room until the Scottsdale police arrive to take my felony fraud report. Gavin dropped his crystal champagne flute. It shattered against the marble floor. The engagement gala disintegrated. The wedding was canceled instantly. Marcus's corporate lawyers began financially disemboweling Christina, freezing her legacy accounts before she could move a single dime of the stolen money. But Gavin, having never faced a real consequence in his entire sheltered life, genuinely believed he could still win with stealth and brute physical force. At 2:00 in the morning, a week after the gala, he approached my Phoenix apartment. He did not kick the door in. He used a spare key he had stolen from my purse while I was comatose in the hospital. He slipped inside quietly, intending to smash my laptop, steal the physical medical documents, and silence me for good. The heavy front door clicked shut behind him. That is exactly when my trap snapped closed. I was not inside the apartment. I was parked safely in my car 3 blocks away, watching a live feed on my dashboard monitor. My phone alerted me to the interior motion sensors the second he crossed the threshold. With one single tap on my screen, I remotely engaged the smart lock vacation mode. The mechanism disabled the interior thumb turn entirely. Another tap, and the heavy electronic steel security shutters rolled down over the windows. He was trapped inside a concrete box with 4 hidden cameras recording his every frantic move. He tore the living room apart, screaming my name, but the apartment was empty. I calmly dialed emergency services and reported a felony break-in in progress. The police arrived within 6 minutes. They drew their weapons and unsealed the door. Gavin was arrested on site, face down on my rug in handcuffs. He had successfully upgraded his white-collar fraud problem into a violent felony breaking and entering charge. As a final measure of closure, Marcus Foster's ruthless legal team handed the dirty notary's forged logbook directly to the state board and the district attorney. Todd, the fraternity brother, was stripped of his license and indicted. Gavin would have a very familiar face waiting for him on his cell block. Sitting on the cedar porch of my newly reclaimed Flagstaff cabin, the silence is deafening. But it is finally completely mine. The crisp mountain air fills my healed lungs. The legal aftermath was a slow, grinding machine, but it was relentless. The judge sentenced Gavin to 6 years in state prison with no eligibility for parole until he served a minimum of 4. The court ordered Christina to pay $142,000 in direct restitution for the legal fees and the emotional damages, forcing her to liquidate her own home to satisfy Marcus Foster's aggressive civil claims. The community fallout was absolute. Christina's country club memberships were revoked. Her friends stopped answering her calls. She was entirely exiled from the wealthy social circles she had destroyed her own daughter to infiltrate. 3 months into Gavin's sentence, a handwritten letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address was the state penitentiary, but the handwriting was Christina's. She had mailed it through a proxy. It was the hollow echo of a defeated narcissist. She wrote about the importance of family, about how she was still my mother, about how I needed to find it in my heart to let the past go and help pay for Gavin's commissary account. I stood by the kitchen island, holding the crisp paper. I did not feel a surge of rage. I did not feel a sudden urge to write back and explain my pain. I felt absolutely nothing. I dropped the letter directly into the paper shredder, listening to the hum of the blades, chewing her manipulation into confetti. I walked into my living room, where my chosen family was gathering. Whitney, the nurse who risked her job to help me, was pouring wine. Two other colleagues from the emergency room were arguing playfully over a board game. This is the piece that replaces the chaos when you finally stop allowing toxic bloodlines to dictate your worth. When you survive a family dynamic built on exploitation, you walk away with scars. But you also walk away with a profound, unbreakable clarity. I want to leave you with the exact rules that kept me alive when the people who were supposed to protect me tried to bury me. Rule number 1 is dismantling the myth of the strong one. When a toxic family calls you the strong one, it is never a compliment. It is a utility label. It is their internal justification for abandoning you when you are bleeding. They label you strong so they do not have to feel guilty when they expect you to clean up their messes. They weaponize your resilience to excuse their own parasitic behavior. Never let someone flatter you into becoming their permanent shock absorber. Rule number 2 is understanding the terrifying gravity of boundaries. You cannot negotiate with entitlement using empathy. A narcissist does not speak the language of compassion, they only speak the language of consequences. A boundary without a severe, enforceable consequence is just a suggestion. True peace only arrives when you are entirely willing to let the bridge burn to light your way to safety. You have to be willing to be the villain in their story to protect the hero in your own. Rule number 3 is redefining the ultimate forgiveness. Society aggressively demands that we forgive our family face to face, that we sit across the table and mend fences simply because we share a last name. That is a dangerous lie. Forgiveness does not mean granting access. You can forgive someone, you can release the anger so it does not poison your own heart. But you can forgive them from a completely safe distance while holding them entirely, legally accountable for their actions. You can wish them well and wish them a very long prison sentence at the exact same time. If you have ever been the shock absorber for a family that did not appreciate you, when did you finally step out of the way and let them hit the wall? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if there is a strong one in your life who is carrying far too much weight, send this to them today. Remind them they are allowed to put it down. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are watching Vanessa wake up on a ventilator, listening to her mother sell her out. And you are shouting, why did she ever let them have access to her life in the first place? Why didn't she cut them off years ago? It is so easy to judge from the outside. But let me decode what was actually happening in Vanessa's mind before the crash. She was trapped by something called the slot machine effect. In psychology, we call it intermittent reinforcement. You see, toxic families are rarely cruel 100% of the time. If they were, walking away would be simple. Instead, they treat you like a casino game. You put in your time, your money, your resources, and your sanity. 99 times out of 100, you pull the lever and get absolutely nothing. But that one time, they give you a crumb of validation, a forced smile, a fleeting compliment, a momentary illusion that you are finally part of the family. Vanessa was not stupid or weak. She was simply addicted to the hope of the jackpot, the desperate hope that if she just stayed strong enough, they would finally love her the way she deserved. But the moment she woke up in that hospital bed, the illusion shattered. And from a financial self-defense perspective, what Vanessa did next was an absolute masterclass in survival. First, let's look at what I call the audit strategy. Scammers absolutely hate details. And toxic people rely heavily on confusion and emotional chaos. When her mother tried to gaslight her in the intensive care unit, Vanessa did not argue. She did not beg for an apology or try to make her mother understand her pain. She went straight to the hard data. By bypassing the bureaucratic waiting period and securing her electronic medical records immediately, she built an ironclad, undeniable case. Anesthesia charts do not lie, and timestamps do not have emotions. She completely separated the cold facts from the family drama. Next, look at her execution at the gala. This is the leverage play. She did not grab a microphone, scream, or cry about how she was wronged. Emotional outbursts just give toxic people ammunition to call you crazy. Instead, she took her audited proof directly to the one person who had the capital and the ruthless motivation to enforce a consequence, the billionaire father-in-law. She essentially outsourced her justice to Marcus Foster's corporate legal team. She let a billionaire's self-interest do the heavy lifting, securing her financial buyout and her ultimate freedom without spending a single dime on her own lawyers. Now, when I sit on the cedar porch of my reclaimed Flagstaff cabin, the mountain air enters my lungs without a machine forcing it there. That alone feels like a miracle. The house is quiet, not the kind of quiet that comes after someone slams a door or withholds affection to punish you. This quiet is clean. It belongs to me. It is the sound of no one demanding money, no one rewriting history, no one calling me selfish because I refuse to bleed for them one more time. For years, my family called me strong. I used to wear that word like a medal. Now I understand it was a collar. They called me strong so they could abandon me without guilt. They called me capable so they could steal from me while I was unconscious. They called me dramatic because the truth threatened the beautiful lie they had built around Gavin. But the truth survived. It survived in an ICU chart. It survived in a timestamp. It survived in a ventilator record that proved I could not have signed away my own home while a machine was breathing for me. They thought my body lying helpless in a hospital bed made me powerless. They forgot that evidence does not need to stand up to destroy a lie. Gavin is exactly where consequences finally found him. Christina lost the social world she sacrificed her daughter to impress. Todd lost the license he used like a weapon. And me, I stopped waiting for them to understand what they did. That was the real freedom. Not the court order. Not the cabin deed. Not even watching their perfect image collapse in front of the people they worshipped. Freedom was the day I shredded Christina's letter and felt nothing. No rage. No grief. No urge to explain. Just peace. So if you are the strong one in your family, listen to me. You are allowed to put the weight down. You are allowed to stop paying for other people's mistakes. You are allowed to protect your money, your home, your body, and your future without apologizing for surviving. Blood may explain where you came from, but it does not get permanent access to where you are going. My name is Vanessa. I woke up from a coma and found out my family had sold my sanctuary, so I took it back, and this time, no one has the key but me. Here is the final verdict. You are not a human battery designed to power someone else's ego. And you are certainly not a bank account for their mistakes. The moment you realize your love and loyalty are being treated with an invoice, it is time to close the account. Blood might give someone a biological connection, but it does not give them a free pass to your assets or your peace of mind. If you have ever had to financially or emotionally untangle yourself from a toxic situation, I want to hear how you did it. Drop your survival strategy in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe so you are ready for the next breakdown. Stay smart and protect your peace.